Hello everyone and welcome back to Painting with Martin. Today we're going to continue our painting series with one model from the Company of Heroes the board game, this time from the Elite Commanders pack. And the model, let me turn the camera down over here, is what we're going to focus our attention on today is the notorious King Tiger tank from the regular German army. Even though this is from the Elite Commanders pack, I would actually like to say that this tutorial can be used as a general tutorial for all German armor from the base game. And as you can see here, it's noticed you can see it's the King Tiger tank. It's very useful that it has that name on it. And of course, as you know, Company of Heroes, the board game, is published by Bad Crow Games. It was released on Kickstarter a few years ago, and they released the second edition on Kickstarter about a year and a half ago, I believe. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at this beautiful model in about 3 stages. I've already mostly completed the first stage because normally when I paint models, it's useful to have 3 models in place so I can switch between models and you don't have to wait for paint to dry. Now I only have 2 models now. And that means I've base coated. First of all, I primed this one with a spray coat primer called Panzer Yellow from Vallejo. And then I put a base coat on it with another Vallejo color called Middlestone, or Dunkelgelb in German. And this is a paint that is very useful for painting German armor. Simply because it was actually used, that color, back in the days in World War II. So I've coated the entire model with Middlestone in 2 to 3 thin layers. You can do the same. Simply mix 50-50 water and Middlestone and put it all over the tank. Leave it to dry and do it again 2-3 times. Give it a good even layer and then you're almost ready. I also put some paint on the tracks as well as the track links over here on each side of the turret. And I coated them with a paint called Flat Earth from Vallejo as well. Keep in mind that this tank has a detachable turret, and I just wanted to show you what the tank looked like before you painted it. It has this great color, it looks really nice, but if you want it to look a little bit better on the table, please follow along in my video and I'll show you exactly how. Now, I also recommend you not to actually base coat this part of the turret here as well, because it will tend to get stuck when you actually put the turret back onto the tank. So therefore, as you can see, you can turn it around. It goes quite easily around here, so it means you can view it on the battlefield and play around with it a little bit more. Keep in mind that if you do turn it around, the paint tend to chip off a little bit, as you can see over here. See over here, and that's fine. You can use that as saying like, oh yeah, it got battle damage or something like that. So what we're going to do today is that instead of just applying the base coats, we are going to go straight into the camouflage patterns. And I've chosen to use 2 colors here. The first color we are going to use is Vallejo Red Leather. It's kind of a reddish, brownish look, and looks really good. And we're also going to use some Vallejo's reflective green. So it's going to be a green, reddish, brownish pattern. And I'm going to show you I'm going to show you 2 ways to do this. The first one is very easy. You'll take an old brush. In this case, I'm using an old Winsor & Newton Cotman brush. It's a Model 3 one that it's pretty much destroyed over here. I use it for dry brushing and other things, but it's very good. So what you do is you simply take some paint, you give it a paint bottle a good shake to release all the pigments from the bottom, and you put it out in your wet palette or your regular palette. I use it neat, so don't dilute it with water. It's very important. So I'm going to use it over here. I put it over here like this, and what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take off some of the paint from it, like this. Now, what you're looking for is a kind of like a rough, stiffling motion. So something like this on the tank, a rough, stiffling motion up and maybe a little bit to the side. That's one method you can use. As you can see, it looks quite okay. A little bit odd and uneven. And please make sure don't cover maybe the track links here. Make sure you also don't cover the tracks over here as well, but you can cover some of the wheels over here as well as the gun barrel. The other method you can use is you can take a piece of foam core. Foam core can be found in some blister packs from some games. It can also be found as insulation material. It's also a really nice way of actually painting miniatures with it. And you put some paint on it. You're going to put some of the paint off from it on a piece of kitchen towel. And then what you do is you simply apply it like this. Dab it on the turret and on the hull. Please even down over here and over here perhaps. Maybe a little bit on the turret. Maybe a little bit also on the gun barrel. Don't forget the lower hull. If you run out of paint, please just refill and do it again. The point here is not to cover the entire tank with it, because you want to leave some space for the green. And when it's finished, it looks a bit like this. Okay, very easy. Same. The other method you do, the other paint you put on is simply you clean the paintbrush before, of course. So make sure that no paint remains. You wipe it off on a piece of kitchen towel, and then you're ready to go with reflective green. Reflective green is kind of like a dark green Vallejo paint. It's not too dark, and I'll show you how. You put it out in your palette over here. Of course, undiluted, and use the same thing. You can choose to either use a brush or you can use a sponge. I prefer to use a sponge. It's a little bit easier to work with. So I'm going to use this method now. But keep in mind, if you don't have one of these sponges, you can also use a kitchen sponge. And if you just have an old brush, that's perfectly fine as well. So I'm going to put it out over here. So start with the turret. See? And I'm going to continue with the gun barrel. And I learned this technique from another YouTuber called Pete the Wargamer. He has a really cool channel. You should really check it out. He's much more experienced than I am. So, but he used a different paints. I'm not copying him entirely. I'm just using his technique here. And he's a really experienced YouTuber. And he has about 100,000 subscribers. So one day maybe I'll get there as well. Who knows? But check his channel out. And don't forget to use down over here, a little bit over here to the side. Can paint some of the backs. You don't want it to cover the entire tank, because you want to, of course, leave some of the yellow showing in the middle. It looks fairly okay. While we're waiting for this to dry, we are actually going to paint some of the smaller parts on this tank. Now, normally, I would say that you could leave this for the highlighting or the finishes or the finishing touches, whatever you want to use, whatever you want to call it. But I'm going to choose to put it on right now, simply because then when we put the shade on, it's going to be a lot easier to notice those details. So what we're going to focus on now is we're going to paint the gun barrel. We're going to paint some of the tools, as well as some of these wires or chains they used to tow tanks that were damaged or you need to repair. We're also going to paint some the exhaust pipes over here. And we're going to start with, since the paint is still drying over here, I don't want to cover it entirely. So that means let's start with the machine gun here. And the machine gun on these German tanks was an MG34. It was not an MG42, even though an MG42 was a really much better gun. But the problem with the, and of course, yeah, sorry, we're going to use German grey for it from Vallejo. The problem with the MG42 is that when you needed to replace the barrel, you had to do so by kind of unlocking the barrel and then sliding the new barrel out, the old barrel out, and then putting in the new one. Now in a tank, that's a little bit problematic because you don't want to leave the tank doing so. So therefore, they had the old MG34 from 1934 instead, and it's much better. That's our tank. Sorry, confused it with another tank, which we're going to focus on later on. And so they simply gave us the MG34 and put it into these ball mount here called a Kugelmount in German. And this machine gun really, if you paint it like this, it really helps the whole tank stand out because it's like these tiny details. Try to not get it on the ball mount here. We're also going to put some attention on, I believe there is an axe here, and just put it on the axe blade as you can see it over here like this. And then we are going to put some thing here on this spade here. All German tanks had some kind of tools to help it around. Oh, I almost forgot. Over here you see I don't know, hopefully you can see it. It's a some kind of tool, or it's not a wire, it's some kind of monkey wrench or something like that. Some kind of wrench. While we're at it, we're also going to put some attention on these wires. I'm going to use the same color here, German grey. We'll make them stand out. It's a little bit fiddly work, but you can actually easily pick out the details over here. And the King Tiger was kind of like the big brother of the German famous Tiger tank. It was not seen on the battlefield that often because it was given to elite units, most notably heavy panzer battalions, and around 492 were produced all in all, which is not that many. It was a heavy tank. It was produced by, I believe it was Krupp. It had mostly two turrets, and these two turrets are erroneously called a Porsche and Henschel turret. We're looking at a Henschel turret here, and they were only given these names after the war. Before that, it was just one turret or two production models, and the Henschel turret was considered to be a little bit better, and that's the most commonly used. Nowadays, you can see one fully operational King Tiger tank in working order in a French museum. It works, has a running engine, and it's used on tank shows, and I'm not sure if it's done in any movies. Keep in mind, over here, you have some kind of extra wiring. I'm going to paint this. You can either leave it as it is, or you can choose to paint this one with some German grey. I'm going to put some German grey on it, and then I'm going to cover it with some metal paint. But if you want to just leave it as it is, that's perfectly fine as it is. And keep in mind, this painting like the Tiger tank like this, you can use this same method to paint the base game of the German armor in the Company Heroes, the board game. So you don't need to have the Elite Commanders pack. Not at all. This can be used as a general tutorial for German armor in Company Heroes, the board game. Now, the reason why I'm not showing you the base game is the following. I was really excited when I got the game, and I decided to paint the German armor first of all, before I had even thought of having a YouTube channel. I just wanted to look good on the table because it's my favorite faction to play. So that's what happens. So that's why you don't see me painting like the German Panzer IVs or like the other vehicles in the base game, unfortunately. Over here you can also see another tool, and we're going to give it a small paint coat of German grey. I think it's some kind of hammer or maul, like M-A-U-L, because I'm not a native speaker. Like this. Before we move on and give this some shade, as you can see, it's almost dry. We are going to focus our attention on these exhaust pipes. I'm going to show you a good way to actually paint them. And what we do is we clean our brush in between, put make sure that no paint is mixing, and then we are going to put some we're going to use some flat earth mixed in with a little bit of red leather. So I'm going to put it out over here. There's not much red leather left now because it has to dry very quickly unless you have a wet palette, which I recommend you getting if you have the money, if you want to invest more in your miniature painting. So these exhaust pipes were either painted brown on the second thought, I think we're just going to stick with red leather here. My mistake here. I make mistakes when I'm painting. Everyone makes them. Now I'm just going to try and paint it over. It also happens. If you're unhappy with the result, just go back to the previous stage and simply say like, okay, this was a bad idea. Let's just redo it and go back to and go forward. And the reason why I want red leather is that I wanted to have like a kind of like a red look, kind of like a red rusty look. That's the point of things. I want them to look a little bit corroded. And as you can see, it looks quite okay now. I'm using a Winsor Newton Cotman 3 brush for this, but you can also use for some more details a size 2 or a size 0 for it. I'm using the paint undiluted. And let's cover this one up a little bit. It's going to look a little bit more brownish than the other one. Can't really be helped. But for those of you who are watching, don't make my mistake. Just put some red leather on this exhaust pipe. You'll be fine. Make sure you cover all of it, best of your knowledge. It's always going to be a small crack or somewhere where I missed that point. And it also helps the tank stand out a little bit on the battlefield. I like these small details that you can, like, point out, oh, he paid some more attention to this part, or oh, he actually forgot about this part. That's also possible. So, okay, so it looks quite okay. The paint is pretty much entirely dry. I can actually check. Put some paint on it. Yes, it's actually fine. Like this. Sorry about bouncing the camera here. And then what we're going to do now is we're going to put some shade on this tank. And the shade I've chosen to use is also from Vallejo, and it's called a Sepia wash. It's from Vallejo. This is the brand for it. It's called Game Wash, but it's from Vallejo. And since it's quite thick to begin with, I'm gonna dilute it with about 50% water. So about 2-3 drops of this one, and about 1, 2, 3 brushfuls of water in it. Okay, so putting out like this over here, and then I'm going to take an older brush. Let's take this one. It's an older brush, also from Vallejo, Vallejo Paint Master. I'm going to use some water. You can also use something called lamine medium, or a medium for it. I tend to use water. It's nicer, and a little bit more water. And you mix it around. Try and make sure not to spill it. And you will pretty much coat the entire model with this. I'm going to start by coating the tracks. And it's nice to use a flat brush for this. You don't want it to pool on the surfaces. You want it to pool in the recesses. So take quite a few brushfuls and let it pool inside here. Let's get in all the nooks and crannies, stay there. It's going to take a while until it dries, but when it does, it's going to look phenomenal. Putting it out over here, coating the undersides as well. Now you can also coat the flat areas. And you can actually leave it like this so I can show you. Let it leave it all these recesses, and this is a really good model to paint. It's a delight to paint this one. And if you feel that it's collecting too much on the surface areas, then take a wet brush and simply slide it off. You see over here, it's really a good way of just getting it off. To put it on a piece of kitchen towel, and here it's really good that it soaks in these recesses. I'm going to show it around here for you, and of course on the track links here, on the other side here too. And as you can see, it's already started to give some definition to this model. Here, over here, and to the side here. Don't forget our undercoated here. You also wanted the wash to paint to come in this area, as well as the other side of the gun barrel, and of course the gun mantle. King Tiger tank was a king, the beast on the battlefield. It could outshoot pretty much any allied tank in service at quite a big range with its 88mm gun, or 8.8 as was known in German. Now we're painting the final part here. Lots of small recesses here. Make sure that it pools. It was feared on the battlefield, but this late in the war, more numerous of these tanks would have made more of a difference, and by that time of the war Germany had already lost. Okay, we're going to leave this to dry for a second, and you don't have to wait for me to focus to dry this model, because I've already pre-painted and washed another model, and when you finish, it's going to look pretty much like this. It's going to leave it to dry. It has kind of like a dark, grimy finish right now. So we are going to do two things. We're going to make sure that we're going to highlight this one up with some more details, make sure that it stands out a little bit more. We are also going to paint the wheels over here inside the wheelbase. I think that's what you call it. And of course all the metal metal parts on this tank. Now I'm just going to wipe this off because I have a very small area to work with here. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a very small brush called 00 from Winsor & Newton Cotman series, and we're going to paint the road wheels using some German grey. Now, I was hoping that I was going to keep this video under 30 minutes. I'm not sure if I will be able to do so. I'm fairly new here at YouTube, so forgive me if this video will be longer than 30 minutes. I'm trying to improve myself every single time, but this time it couldn't be helped. So in this case, the road wheels can be a little bit fiddly to get to, but if you don't have, if you're a bit fiddly like me, what you can do as well, you can take a marker pen and mark them out with it. But with a bit of practice, you can actually get it done. As you can see, it looks a little bit better. It's these details that really makes the tank pop. And I like details on tanks. I've been an avid tabletop gamer for about 10 years. I prefer to paint miniatures from board games instead of pure miniature games, because unlike people who play 40k and Warhammer 40k and like Warhammer Fantasy, I'm not that good to paint these models, and I just want them to look fairly good on the table. I don't aim to win any competitions. I just enjoy painting, and that's what I'm trying to get you to do as well. And the King Tiger tank in this board game doesn't come out very often, but when it does, it's a late game vehicle, and that's why I've chosen to paint this tank itself with a late game camouflage pattern, or a late war camouflage pattern, I should say. Now you see, that's what it looks like when you've more or less done painting the road wheels. And then we simply switch to the other side and do it again. It's not that hard. You will actually get the hang of it fairly easily, but if you want a tip, don't hold the paintbrush over like this. Hold it very close to the end. That means it will give you a lot more control, and that means you will make less mistakes, and you will learn more. And this is a tip I got from a really good painter called Sarastro. The way to paint the road wheels, I got this tip when I painted my Flames of War Stug, the Sturmgeschütz units about 10 years ago. Then I didn't have a YouTube channel. And there's actually a video for that on the Flames of War YouTube channel. And it uses a little bit of a different variation of painting camouflage, but it's very similar to what we've been using today. And just going to angle this over here. I'm going to show you the result just in a second, just so I can reach the all the road wheels here. If you want to, after you painted the road wheels, you can, and this is entirely optional, to give them a shade of black wash or Nuln Oil. It's entirely optional. I've chosen not to do it. I think they look quite okay as they are. And finally, we're coming in on the final road wheel. Sorry about that. there you go. Looks quite neat. Now, before we move on to the other small part of the details, as you can see, I missed actually painting this tool here, so I'm going to paint it over here while I'm already having my paintbrush loaded with German grey. With so many small details on these miniatures, and Vallejo Games did a really good job with this one, it's very easy to miss them. Now, we are going to simply clean our paintbrush. Make sure you do that as well. And we are going to paint some dry brushing on this miniature. And we are going to use either a paint called Iraqi Sand or a paint called Buff. Both of them works really well. I'm going to show both of them over here to you. This is Buff, and this is called Iraqi Sand. One of them is a little bit lighter, so I'm going to try to put some Buff on this one and see how it goes. I never tried this before, so this is going to be new to me. But we're going to do a very, very light dry brush, which means that it's going to be almost no paint on the brush at all. I'm going to show you as well what Iraqi Sand looks like, so you can see the difference, not just from the bottle. So over here you have Buff, and over here you have Iraqi Sand. It's they're very, very similar. One of them is a slight tone variation of the light. I'm going to use a dry brushing a round one. You can also use a makeup brush, which is really good for that. So I'm going to take this one off the camera for a second to load up the brush with a lot of the paint, so don't bump into the camera again. Then I'm going to wipe most of the paint off. There you go. And then what we're going to do is just painting, so as you can see here, the raised areas here, get some definition on it. It also gives it a way to smooth out some of the wash where it is pooled unevenly. And it gives it a weathered, dusty look. Don't forget the other side, and you can also turn the turret. Make sure that you can reach the sides of the tank where you didn't get it. There we go. As you can see, the edges are now looking a little bit better. What we're also going to do while we're dry brushing is that we're going to use the same brush, and we're going to paint some metal on the track links as well as the tracks themselves, making them stand out a little bit. And for that color, we're going to use some natural steel from Vallejo, and That's also, again, a very, very light dry brush. I'm going to take this off the camera a little bit. Like this. Wiping off the brush. Very, very light dry brush. Wipe out most of the paints from this here. And dry brush the tracks. Also dry brush the tracks over here, the track links. And so you can see I made a mistake here. I put some too much of it, so I'm going to try and dry brush it again with another brush, smaller brush. Can be a little bit of a heavy dry brush on this one. Make sure the steel part stands out a bit more. Some tanks and some models they actually did, and others they did not. And you can also dry brush, if you can get the hang of it, or actually if you can reach it, sorry, the gun barrel of the MG34 machine gun. Okay, you can also do the same thing with this metal part here, as well as the wires. Like this, and a little bit on the tool over here, as well as the exhaust pipes. They got too much of the Iraqi sand or buff on it. It's always a way to fix it. It looks quite okay. Now that step is done, we are going to put some tiny details of steel on the tools that we can reach to dry brush, such as the spade over here, as well as the axe, and if we dry brushed it too much, we can actually cover this one with some steel as well, natural steel from Vallejo. So it looks quite okay. However, we're not really finished with this one. At least I don't think so. I can always add a little bit more details. So I'm going to put some colors on the tool handles, which means that we are going to use flat earth this time from Vallejo, and because we don't want them to be metal, we want them to be made out of wood. Spilled some wood, spilled some paint. If you spill some paint, make sure you wipe it off, otherwise it can end up on your fingers, or worst off, even on your miniature. So the tool handle here will really stand out if we paint it with some flat earth. Okay, that's the tool handle for the spade, and that's the tool handle for the axe. All right, starting to look really well. And we are also going to put some rust and grime effects on this tank, because I feel this tank was not factory new when it was made right now, came to the battlefield. It had been seen as plenty of some action against the Allied forces. So what we are going to do is we're going to put some, I used this paint before, called Citadel's Typhoid Corrosion, which is a very grimy paint. It's very thick. It's one of the technical paints that they use, and I'm going to put some on the thing here, and I'm going to put it in between the tracks here. like this. Make sure that some of this, the shiny metal edge has been taken away. I'm going to put it on some of the exhaust fumes over here. Make sure that it looks a bit dirty. And what I do is that I simply take a piece of paper and wipe some of it off. Probably you should use a piece of cloth because it's going to be a bit easier. Oh, threads here. You can also use it on some of the tools here, the tool handles. Make sure that a little bit grimier. Especially this part here. I don't know what it is. If someone can tell me what it is, I'd be very happy to know. As well as on these exhaust pipes here. A lot of rust and grime would actually end up here, especially on these areas here in the back. And maybe even around the machine gun. Can also serve as a little bit of extra camouflage if you should see it like that. Also being this, the commander's cupola. There's also going to be some rust and grime there, as well as the hatch over here. You can also put it on some of the behind for the tracks here, so you can see some mud was perhaps kicked up, perhaps some here as well. Use it as a rough with an old brush, rough stiffling motion. Completely optional looks, but I think it looks quite okay. And there's some exhaust pipes there. Here's another one. As you can see, we didn't paint the hull here. As I told you before, it gets stuck. So, and over here it tends to kick up some. My voice is lost today. Some dust and grime. So something like this, almost done. Thank you for staying with me. And I would also like to add some more rust and grime effect called Ryza Rust from Citadel. This is a dry color, which means it is very very dense, very thick. I would recommend using only a tiny bit of this one because it tends to be very dominant. What you do is you simply put your paintbrush in it, dab it in it. You can see it's already forming some rusty looks. You wipe it off, most of it on your over here. You can see that I wiped some of it off. It tends to be very dominant, and I'm going to use it very sparingly on these part here, exhaust parts. And I'm going to use some of it on my hand to wipe it off. So you can see it's a very subtle effect, but I really enjoy it. You can also use in some of the tool handles here. Maybe some German soldiers weren't very careful with them. And here, more importantly, on this part here. You can see it went a little bit rusty. You can also use it on some of the tracks. Maybe they're old and worn, maybe they weren't factory new. If you feel that they're a bit too shiny from the natural steel from Vallejo before, you can actually cover this one up with some rust, make them stand out a little bit. You can also use it on some of the exhaust ports here. So like this. Before we're going to put our final attention on this King Tiger, we are going to put some optional, entirely optional shading. We're going to use some Vallejo's black wash for this. And the reason for that is that I want some part of the miniature to stand out even more. I'm going to use it neat, and I want to raise some of these hatches here. I want them to stand out, so I'm going to put a fine line around it. Maybe around the glasses. And some of these hatches here. Don't let it pull too much. And also this hatch here on the back. And the cupola over here. These parts over here can also be used. Make sure they stand out, these plates. As well as in between, you can cover some of, if you feel it's too shiny, the axe and the spade, as well as the metal on the metal part here. Then you can do so too. I think they stand out a little bit more. There are two ways you can shade the model. Either you can use it selectively afterwards, or you can use it selectively and don't shade the entire model with just the parts you want to stand out. You can come back to the commander's cupola, because I think this really stands out on the tank. And I want it to be the central focus on the tank, with the commander actually put his head out. Some of these raised areas here, all of these areas that have some kind of like raised area would like to be, and as well you can focus some on the gun barrel here as well, and the muzzle brake. Inside the muzzle brake as well, make sure that it stands out. There you go. For the final stage before putting on some gloss varnish, sealing this model, we are going to put it for one final touch, and that is, I'm actually going to use a color we haven't used this one, called Vallejo's White. And for those of you who can start guessing, I'm going to put it on the gun barrel. Perhaps you can start guessing why I would do that, and you guessed it correctly. I want to put some kill marks on this tank. I don't want it to be a rookie tank. I have never done this before. This is completely new to me. I'm very terrible actually at coming up with things on the go. And I've never done such hard painted work on this tank before. So I'm going to use a tiny bit of white, and I'm going to put it on the tank here. One here, a small line, and then a line over here, and then one underneath it. There's one. It's a little bit uneven. Then I'll put one more. This looks a little bit better. And if you feel it's looks really bad, you can easily just touch it up with some Middlestone. And I'm going to put one more. Like I said, this is entirely optional. I just feel it adds a little bit of a focal point of this tank. Something like this. There you have it. This one is almost dry as well. I'm going to add some final details on this tank when it's completely dry. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe and consider liking it. Please share it with your friends, and I will be happy to show you more of Company of Heroes the board game or another board game. If you want me to paint something else, let me know. Let me know in the comments below. In the comments below, or in the description box actually, you will also see all the paints I used for this miniature. And until next time, put some paint on those brushes, put those paints on those miniatures. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.